What's going on, guys? This is Ryan Peters, and I have a special guest, Mr. Greg Lemonte, joining us here on this episode of Stuck in the Nosebleeds. We're talking a little bit of college basketball or the overall landscapes in college sports in general. After big news when Tony Bennett, 2 weeks before the start of the regular season, has announced that he is retiring at the golden age of 55 years old from the University of Virginia. Greg, I know we had a conversation before getting on here talking about just kind of how unlikely this was, the rumors came out Thursday evening that he was set to make a press conference. A lot of us were hoping that it wasn't, illness or some type of family issue, but it comes down to Tony Bennett just doesn't want to coach basketball anymore. So, what was your overall reactions after hearing what he had to say in his press conference, and then just a few hours thinking about it?
Well, thanks for having me, Ryan. Honestly, my first initial reaction from Tony Bennett, the Virginia program, is I was definitely surprised. I think reflecting on the overall landscape of college sports in general, I'm not shocked, but I am surprised in the nature in which he did it, as well as the time frame of it. But I think you're going to play some snippets here from him himself that might explain some more. But definitely surprised. He will be missed. One of the great minds in college basketball. But overall, it's definitely important for the future of college sports in general.
Yeah, I think more than anything, what surprised me is when Nick Saban says he's going to retire. You're like, well, it's got to happen at some point. And he's obviously on the thumbnail here, and so is Nick, Jay Wright, Nick Saban, both those guys. When they retire, it's still shocking.
Yeah,
Those are championship level coaches. Tony Bennett's a championship level coach, but I mean, we're talking 2 decades difference when it comes to their age. Some would argue that Tony Bennett's just now getting to the prime of his coaching career, in his mid 50s. And I think to me, that's kind of what took me aback. And obviously the timing. I think anybody that would say the timing right now for anyone is not great. I mean, it kind of reminds you of Bo Ryan, don't it? Right
yeah.
at Wisconsin not too long ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's just you take so much time to build this program, to build the philosophy, to build the culture. It's hardly ever an overnight success. Um, Specifically, Jay Wright. It's I think Villanova had a sense of a glass ceiling as a program for the longest time, and he was able to break through. And that's like, okay, we're here at the promised land. We can just have this machine start rolling for another decade or so, and then it's over. It's over like that, just based on his feelings around the sport. So that's kind of the sentiment here as well. It's yeah, definitely shocking. Definitely shocking.
Well, let's go into exactly what he had to say, and this is coming from Greg Paulson on X, formerly the artist known as Twitter.
This game, I think it's right for players, student athletes to receive revenue. Please don't mistake me. I do. I think it is. Um, but the game and college athletics is not in a healthy spot. It's not. And there needs to be change. And it's not going to go back. I think I was equipped to do the job here the old way. And that's who I am, and that's how it was. And my staff has buoyed me along to get to this point. But there needs to be change. It's going to be closer to a professional model, Coach Carlisle. I think it is, where there's got to be collective bargaining. There has to be a restriction on the salary pool that teams can spend. There has to be transfer regulation restrictions. There has to be some limits on the agent involvement to these young guys. And there are good agents and there are bad agents, and they're driving some of this stuff that we're in. And I worry a lot about the mental health of the student athletes as all this stuff comes down. And it's sometimes when you're in it, you have to step away, and maybe I can be an advocate for the student athletes and the coaches to get the changes. But this is a place that will.
So there's the initial takeaways from, or I think the biggest conversation point coming from that interview. We all expected I enjoyed it here, yada yada yada. But I think when you're reading the headlines, when you're listening to the clips, Greg, that's the biggest one taken away. So I want to ask you this first, and we'll kind of delve the conversation leading off of this. I think a lot of people today, especially on social media, will say you can't say anything bad about NIL or players getting paid without completely then being turned upon you that the coaches are not trying to live by the same standards. And somehow the two things can't coexist. Is that true? Do you believe that? Is there hypocrisy talking when a coach talks about regulations on transfers and things like that when it comes to regulation on making money? Is that hypocritical coming from a coach now, or is there a world that both things can exist?
I think there's a world where both things can exist. I think a lot of it comes with the fear of the unknown, the status quo. Um, I think there is a lot of validity in a coach saying there needs to be regulation, um, there needs to be some type of accountability without sounding like I it's unfair for me to win. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
And I think a lot of coaches you hear, whether it's football or basketball, they're legitimately, even baseball, college baseball, they're legitimately interested in having name, image, likeness, but they want to see some reformation. They want to see some accountability, and a lot of times those conversations can come off as, well, it's because they're not succeeding. Now they want to change the rules. It's because they're not a program with specific accomplishments. Now they want to move the goalposts so they can, Dabo Sweeney. He's extremely, like, he has plenty of takes where this comes off, and I think he's just more of a guy that social media and the media likes to pick on in general. But yeah, I think overall, I don't know if it's just mutually exclusive altogether. I think there is some give and take there.
Do you think that Tony Bennett is retiring because he is unwilling to change with the times?
I think he's unwilling. I think he is. I think he's tired. I would say. I think if he had an extra, if this started 10 years ago, he would not retire.
Okay,
I think
I
if
think it's
this
fair.
started 10 years ago, he would absolutely not retire. I think if he was still without a national championship, I think he would still continue to navigate this landscape. Um, but again, I think we kind of alluded to this a couple days ago. You have a national championship. Your statue is likely being built, or something's being named after you at Virginia. You're 55 years old. You have kids. I'm not sure the ages of his kids, but there's just life events in general, and those pros are absolutely outweighing the cons of recruiting. He has struggled. Virginia has struggled the last 2 seasons. They did make the tournament, the play-in, or the first four, and again struggle in that. Did not win a game this past year. I think there's overwhelming struggles there too, or just pressure in general, to get back to a national title, to get back to a Final Four, and with the changes altogether, yeah, I think he's just completely content at this moment, and I think we're all completely fine with that, which we'll get into here shortly. I just think, for me, in my opinion, the nature and the the quickness to retirement 2 weeks before the season is kind of where a lot of people are struggling with.
Right. And, I think this is the way I look at it, and this is kind of how I express it to you, off mic. When it comes to coaching, it's such a 365-day event. IU fans have been very upset at Mike Woodson because he has not made it a 365-day event
Right.
when it comes to his recruiting style. And, that kind of what we were alluding into, hiring a 60-plus-year-old guy that's not in college athletics for him to have to learn. And not that Tony Bennett has to learn, he was having to evolve. I think a lot of people are going to say, well, he just threw in the towel on his team right before the season started. And to me, going into what coaching is today, you're talking to the recruit. Do you even get an opportunity to talk to the recruit if you don't have a dollar amount right there on the table?
Right.
Can you securely talk about that dollar amount on the table? Do you have a own salary cap within your own organization that says we're allowed to use so much salary? Do you have to go back and forth with a financial person to do that? Can you tell your recruit that they're a fit in your system? Can you promise them playing time? Are you expecting other guys to transfer immediately so where that recruit then believes he has playing time? If that recruit doesn't have playing time, is he going to stay? the, it feels like you're walking on glass and nothing is secure. Like your program is just in, quicksand. Like if I'm not moving one way or the other, stuff will go over my head before I even know it happens. And I think we saw that at IU. We saw
Yeah.
the lack of recruits. Whenever a couple recruits don't come to your program, it suddenly makes you look like you're not trying. And I don't think that that's the case. I just think the ever evolving landscape with now trying to throw money at it, and it's not like pro. You sign a guy like we got Jamar Chase here as Bengals fans for 4 years. We know that immediately.
Yep.
A recruit you may not have for 6 months. And I just think finally, after getting to that point, and God knows what it could have been, Greg. He said that he had a fall vacation and just kind of let things go. And that was when he knew that it was time to walk away.
Sure.
And you see that like in NASCAR, you NASCAR fans that are joining, Carl Edwards did that in the prime of his career. Some would say that Tony Stewart beat him to death mentally, that it forced him into retirement. But you just find guys that get content. And I don't know when the right time to quit is or hang it up. I can
Right.
tell you when it doesn't feel good, and that's 2 weeks
Yeah.
before a season starts.
Yeah, that's the painful part because you're looking at players and recruits and transfers that you've spoke to all summer long. Season ticket holders, they have non-refundable season ticket. A lot of these things are a lot bigger than I guess the program or the individual itself, which does make it come off as more of a selfish or self-interest decision. But again, you're a multimillionaire coach, Hall of Fame coach. Um, your boss is likely supporting you. Your family supports you. Like it's okay. Like it's time to go. And if he again in his presser, if he feels he was not the right person to lead this team for one more season into the depths of the ACC, then absolutely you're doing everybody else a favor by acknowledging it now and letting someone else who's more fit for the job this season to take over because that's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, I'm not going to say it's just show up to the game, show up to all these season games and you coach and then you go home and hang out. Like it's like you said, it's 365 24/7. So I would say just again, the shocking part to me is more of the timing of it, but again, I can understand why. But again, on a scale of Tom Izzo to Dusty May on where his career arc might have ended, I was probably leaning more of like the Dusty May still got juice left in the tank, but it is what it is. I think he's a great coach, Hall of Fame coach. Um, to be able to grow up in the game through his father and you know essentially just be this great is hard to do. So yeah,
For a coach, a lot of what you preach is commitment. And let's take a look at Tony Bennett, the way that he plays, the way that he coaches, excuse me. His players had to play defense in a way that is there's so much discipline behind it that everybody has to be on the same page. And I think, when you see Jay Wright and when you see Nick Saban and when you see Roy Williams to a certain extent, his offensive philosophy, these guys that did it a certain way, now you see new coaches coming up. We see Coach Prime, we see uh, Brian Kelly trying to adopt to a new style of recruiting and things like that. Is it just a certain personality that's not going to be able to fit in NIL that requires so much commitment to do their type of philosophy that they're just realizing that it's just better to leave now than try to force people to adopt? Is that fair? Or do you just think that this is just kind of these all these guys just it's a changing of the guard. When Peyton Manning left, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, it was all going to happen. It just hurts that it happened so close, to what you recognize as greatness. Is that the case, or do you just think that NIL is going to claim more victims the more that we go based upon a certain type of coaching style?
Yeah, I think I think NIL has I think it's sped up the process of young players, young athletes, kind of focused on the wrong things or focused on the end goal too quickly. So you look at the NBA and you see it happens every year. Um, Young rookies, young players, they just get out ahead of themselves, so they lack that focus of this is not the destination that I'm. Just because you get drafted, just because are on an NBA roster, doesn't mean you've made it. Like you continue to
Hmm.
go, and that can absolutely multiple rookies a year. They consider it the final destination, and their play tapers off, their commitment tapers off, and their career tapers off. And I think this has kind of moved it back into the college realm where it's like, again, it's a coach, just because we're talking about it, it's Tony Bennett, and he's speaking to a player, and he's providing that philosophical, those lessons, the training, the trying to prepare for the season, and he's instilling that, and the player is like, that's cool, but what about the money?
Hmm.
And coach is like, yeah, absolutely, the money is great, it's going to happen, but this is what this means, and this is how we can reach our goals this season. And the player says, okay, cool, I'm all for that, but how much money? And he's like, that's what we're trying to get you to. But so it's just this back and forth of like, we've kind of moved that, or we've kind of brought the toothpaste out of the tube, where now the money is kind of infiltrating this growth, this developmental league, college basketball, and it's kind of pushing the older coaches, the tenured coaches out. Those who are staying, again, Tom Izzo is still in it for now, but I think
Very
that's
much against the current culture of basketball, so I feel like the clock's limited on him.
yeah, yeah. But I think that's kind of where it feels we're going to see more of is this, until there is some type of regulation, until there is some type of, are they employees? Like that's a whole different video, a whole different conversation that you know the NCAA is having to deal with, is the employment status of these athletes. Um, but I think that's just kind of infiltrating because it's so broad right now. There's not a lot of regulation.
I think there's different ways of now setting up your team, and think this is harder now maybe than it's ever been. I always said that NIL was going to make it to where these lower tier systems, these if you want to call them Group of Five schools, were literally going to be the farm system for the main power conferences,
Yeah.
and to a certain extent that's been the case, and to a certain extent it's actually given Power Five athletes an opportunity to go down if something didn't get fulfilled. But what's being lost is the ability to grow athletes. And I feel
Yes.
like when you're committing to Tony Bennett, you have to commit yourself that, hey, I'm not going to get all the stats that I want. I'm not going to get all the glamour of being at Virginia. But if I'm committed to Tony Bennett, I will leave here a better basketball player from a mental
Yep.
standpoint, more than likely a physical standpoint, but only 1% of athletes get to play professional sports leaving the college game. And I feel like the system that we have in college athletics is now making its way into everyday life. It is hard. I just celebrated my 10-year anniversary at a company. I see people, Greg, that I no longer even attempt to learn their name more often than not, because I don't know if they'll be here next week. And I
Yeah.
feel like college athletics has taken on that identity, and that we're seeing players that aren't willing to stay, to develop, to because think about me. It's all about me. How I feel today, how I feel right now. Do not make any decision regardless of how it may affect your future. Do how you feel exactly in the moment right now, and whatever happens happens. when I look at a player that you well know, like Anthony Leal, I feel like Anthony Leal at IU, a Mr. Basketball who stuck it out, who probably should have got more playing time. I think definitely should have got more playing time when he was younger, will leave Indiana with a legacy of being one of the most beloved players in IU history. And is that
Yeah.
something that's going to resonate with him as an adult? I don't really know, but it shows a fan base willing to respect what it takes to be something that's more than just Anthony Leal. Is that too far fetched, or how do you feel?
No, I think that's spot on. I think there's players that still value they still value what it means to play for their university, for their home state. Um, no, I think he absolutely Anthony Leal in general is going to leave a legacy. Is going to leave a better person than when he became an Indiana Hoosier. So um, I think that we need to hold on to, the media needs to focus on players who are willing to commit to that, commit to the integrity of college basketball, to what it means to be a student athlete in general, and shine more light on that, because there's I'm telling you right now, and there's thousands of more athletes under that scope, under that definition, than there are uh, who have signed a 2-year NIL deal for $4 million. Like,
Right.
focus on what makes the sport true and valuable, and I think that's honestly the best way to move forward, and continue to you know shine the light on the sport that we love.
Yeah, I've always said that sports has translated good kids to be great adults. The priorities that we take in sports, the discipline, the sacrifices, have all used those lessons to make employable, self-sustaining adults. Bob Knight, as much as he was under criticism for the things that he did, and I'm not saying everything's great. I don't think you should wipe yourself and then bring it out to your team and use that as motivation. I just don't think that's the best way of doing it. He had 2 kids, never graduate. Those are the type of things that lead you forward to live a successful career. Because I'm worried, Greg, that we're going to have so many stories, too many ESPN 30 for 30s of NC Hammer type of kids. We're going to have kids that I made $3 million in college and I haven't been able to work a single day since I was 25 because I don't know what it takes. All I've
Yep.
ever heard was how great I was and how I'm worth so much. And then once they ran me dry, once they realized myself as the cash cow no longer is valuable at 25 years old because I'm not good enough to now play in Bangladesh, I don't have any other skills. That's my biggest worry with NIL. And I think coaches see that at times too and go, I don't feel like I'm leading kids down the direct path because all I have to do is talk about the upfront check I'm giving them.
Yeah, I mean, it can just be so problematic to only focus on what can you do for me lately, and uh, that's as an Indiana Hoosier fan, I do take a lot of uh, I appreciate what Matt Painter does at Purdue, in the sense of committing to a philosophy, and continuing to find student athletes, to find players that fit his program, and as long as he's successful, it's going to continue to work. But absolutely, I think more times than not, it's just gonna it would just create problems just to continue to do that.
Yeah. And I want to turn it to the other guy at IU, Coach Kurt Signetti, because I feel like he's got a model that in today's landscape, he's found a way to be old school, but also take advantage of what other coaches aren't doing. I often criticize Mike Woodson of how high the number he gets when it comes to the national ranking on composite. And then you
Yeah.
look at Coach Kurt Signetti, who says, no, I have a system. I win. And he brings over 13 guys from James Madison. Now, most people in the country would say that James Madison's nowhere close to having players that should be competing in the Big Ten, but he's been able to evaluate people as much as he's been able to evaluate talent. And hard work pays off when people with talent don't want to work hard. And I feel like he doesn't give a crap about the composite numbers, the composite rankings. He says, "What can I do to help put you in a position to succeed?" And we're immediately seeing that in 1 year, Greg. Is
Yeah.
that the model moving forward for the most successful coaches, or is it the I don't know, the flash in the pan that we got one time from Coach Calipari? I mean, which ones do you think is going to succeed more?
Yeah, experience matters absolutely, and he's preached going back to Kurt Signetti specifically for this past year. He for player development for the goals he had for the program, he absolutely wanted production over potential when it came to the players he was looking for. Show me what you've done, what you've successfully done, the experience you have, as he has also experienced.
Hmm.
um, Sports is a microcosm for society, and those who are successful are typically those who work hard, who sacrifice. And you're seeing it in most programs. There's not a lot of false there's not a lot of false champions, is what I would get at. Those who make it to the top are typically the hardest working, and those who can sustain it and again not have a flash in the pan are typically it's a good precursor for success there.
Do you think that that model that he and Matt Painter can that I mean, those are the two examples that I think of in college athletics. Do you think they continue that success using that, or do you think at some point they're going to have to get really talented guys as well?
I think I think it can be, for the way that the sport is managed now, and I'll touch on basketball first. For the way that the sport is managed now, I think it works. I think there is no harm in attempting the portal, as long as you're still finding guys that fit your philosophy and fit your system. I think it will be necessary at times, especially if there is more avenues for amateur basketball to the professional realm. As far as football, I think football has kind of grown beyond comprehension at times
It is the
with
wild, wild west, man.
yeah,
It is
yeah, and
crazy.
adding the gasoline that is as name, image, and likeness. Um, I guess time will tell. It just all depends on. Um, I guess it just all depends on how bought in you yourself as the head coach can continue to have your staff, to have your AD, to have your players understand that you know not everything is a microwave. Not everything can be flipped overnight. Super happy. I'm a Hoosier fan. I'm an Indiana Hoosier. Very happy that we're 7-0 at the point that this video is being made. But there's going to be times where it's not that easy. There's going to be adversity, and how can you continue to sustain that through recruiting, through the games on Saturdays? I think time will tell. But I would say that as long as those who are willing to sacrifice and put in the work and wait, more times than not, success is there for them.
Yeah, I think the coaches with the strongest foundations that are building their programs, not on lies, not on smoke and mirrors, and more importantly, not on paychecks, you'll get your paycheck. You win ball games, you get the recognition, you'll get your paycheck. Whether you're a Toronto Argonaut or a Chicago Bear, you'll
Yeah,
get your paycheck. You just have to prove that you can be coachable and more like you said, you can be productive. There's not people that are productive that don't get a chance. We would have been laughing 3 years ago if Zach Edey was said that he was going to be the favorite of the rookie of the year conversation in the NBA. But
right.
the young man put in a hell of a lot of work
Yep.
and turned it in a 2 star into, now the betting odds favorite. So, Greg, I want to thank you very much for joining us. I hope we get to have a ton more conversations, especially when it comes around IU athletics and the upcoming basketball season, where we will be staying up probably till 1 a.m. miserable after a West Coast game. But thank you very much, man.
Thanks for having me. Absolutely.
No problem. This has been Stuck in the Nosebleeds. Hopefully, you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. Thanks for tuning in. Stay safe and God bless.